think back for a second to the absolute best boss or mentor you have ever had.
Oh, yeah. I feel like everyone has that one specific person in mind right away.
Right. You got them in your head. Now, consider how they actually operated on a day-to-day basis. Like, did they act like a fault-finding inspector?
Yeah.
Just hovering over your shoulder with a clipboard, waiting to catch you messing up?
Yeah, nobody likes that.
Exactly. Or did they function more like a coach? Someone visibly invested in helping you grow, even when you were, stumbling a bit.
I mean, almost everyone pictures the coach, right?
Yeah.
Human beings just thrive on support, not surveillance. Yet, if we look back at the history of management across, well, countless professions, the dominant paradigm was entirely about catching people doing things wrong.
Yeah, it was all about compliance and fear,
Exactly, just managing by fear.
which honestly sets up the mission of today's deep dive perfectly. We are exploring the really complex, highly pressured world of educational leadership.
It is intensely pressured.
Seriously, we're looking at some deeply researched frameworks on models and approaches in supervision. Specifically, we're drawing from a really comprehensive presentation by Ramnik M. Sabio.
Yeah, it's a fantastic resource.
And look, on the surface, this might sound like a highly specific look at just how we teach teachers. But these frameworks for professional growth are, well, they are absolute masterclasses in organizational psychology.
They really are.
They offer this incredible blueprint for leadership that you can apply to managing a corporate team or running a startup or even just mentoring a peer.
To really understand the stakes here, though, we need to look at the specific laboratory these models are applied to, and that is the Philippine Department of Education, or DepEd.
Right. Massive scale.
Massive. We are talking about a system operating on a truly staggering scale,
Yeah.
responsible for millions and millions of learners. To manage that kind of volume without losing quality, an organization has to rely on very specific, structured frameworks.
Right out of the gate, there are a few foundational blueprints we should define, just so we have our bearings.
Good idea.
In this ecosystem, pretty much everything revolves around the PPST, which stands for the Philippine Professional Standards for Teachers.
Think of that as basically the ultimate definition of what good teaching looks like.
Yeah. And then you have the measuring stick for those standards, which is the RPMS, or Results-Based Performance Management System.
Right. And tying it all together is the MATATAG agenda. That's a national initiative heavily emphasizing continuous instructional leadership. Because, I mean, in a system this vast, standards are just non-negotiable. You need to know what quality looks like, and you need a way to measure it.
But the real friction, and I guess the core of our exploration today, is the human element.
Right.
How do you actually lead the people who are trying to meet those incredibly high standards day in and day out?
That is the million-dollar question.
Okay, let's unpack this, because the way modern educational supervision is actually defined now is a total departure from that old school clipboard inspector we talked about.
Oh, completely. We are moving into a totally different era of leadership, an era that actively tries to dismantle the fear of evaluation.
Educational researcher Carl Glickman provides kind of the defining philosophy here. He frames supervision not as like an event, but as a continuous process.
Right. It's a systematic way of guiding, supporting, monitoring, and evaluating teachers, but always with one singular end goal, which is improving instruction and student learning. It explicitly rejects that old model of inspection or fault finding.
So the emphasis is entirely on collaboration and reflective practice.
Yeah. It's about professional growth. And what's fascinating here is how fundamentally this shifts the power dynamic in a workplace.
How so?
Well, in a traditional compliance-heavy model, the supervisor and the employee are essentially adversaries. The supervisor's job is to uncover flaws, and the employee's job is to, hide them.
Hide the flaws, keep your head down.
Exactly. But when you reframe supervision around collaboration, you completely dismantle that adversarial relationship. You move from a culture of hiding mistakes to a culture of diagnosing them together.
I'm picturing like a high-stress restaurant kitchen.
Okay, I like this.
The old version of management is like the dreaded city health inspector walking in. Everything stops. Everyone panics.
Oh, yeah, absolute chaos.
Right. The staff hides the slightly wilted parsley, and you just pray you pass so they leave. But this continuous, supportive approach, it feels more like a head chef standing next to a sous chef, tasting a simmering sauce together.
That's a great analogy.
The head chef isn't grading the sauce pass or fail. They are tasting it to figure out what spice is missing. They're basically on the same side of the table.
A brilliant way to visualize it. The
Yeah.
head chef ultimately wants that sous chef to develop the palate, to fix the sauce themselves.
But practically speaking, if we strip away the fear of the health inspector, how does a massive organization actually guarantee quality control?
That is the big pushback.
Right. If everything is just about growth and collaboration and good vibes, how does a school system ensure a teacher isn't just delivering subpar lessons day after day?
Well, you don't just put people in a room, tell them to collaborate, and hope for the best. You use highly targeted, structured frameworks. To ensure those national standards are met, supervisors rely on specific models. And it starts with the most rigorous one, which is clinical supervision.
The term clinical sounds very sterile, almost medical.
It does, yeah. But in this context, it really just means objective and systematic. Clinical supervision is designed to enhance teaching effectiveness through highly formalized classroom observations.
Got it.
In the DepEd ecosystem, this is how they actually conduct those RPMS evaluations. It's a 5-phase cycle that essentially removes the subjectivity from management.
Break that cycle down for me. How does a supervisor execute a clinical observation without triggering that old health inspector panic?
It starts before the supervisor ever steps foot in the room. Phase 1 is the pre-observation conference. The leader and the teacher sit down, they look at the lesson plan together, and they establish exactly what they are trying to achieve.
So they're literally setting the rules of engagement beforehand.
Exactly, no surprises. Then phase 2 is the classroom observation itself. The supervisor watches the lesson, but they aren't forming opinions. They are only collecting raw, objective data.
So instead of writing down, the teacher's energy was low, they're writing down only 5 out of 30 students raise their hands during the Q&A.
Correct. Objective data diffuses defensiveness. You can't really argue with the math. And that leads to phase 3, which is data analysis, where the supervisor organizes what they saw.
You're putting the numbers together.
Right. Then phase 4 is the post-observation conference. They sit back down with the teacher and just present the data. And finally, phase 5 is feedback and reflection. The teacher actively participates in figuring out how to improve the next lesson based on those exact numbers.
That seems incredibly effective for getting everyone on the same page. Like, the expectations are clear, the data is objective, and the feedback is immediate.
It is highly effective, but it comes with massive limitations.
Let me guess. Time.
Huge amounts of time. Running a 5-step data-driven cycle requires an enormous time commitment, a deep reservoir of trust, and a highly skilled supervisor. You cannot realistically run clinical supervision for every employee every week.
The system would just grind to a halt. You'd spend all your time analyzing data and holding conferences instead of actually running the school.
Exactly. So if a leader can't use the clinical approach for everyone, they need another tool.
Which brings us back to Carl Glickman, I assume.
Yes. Back to his developmental supervision model. This approach is grounded in adult learning theory and constructivism. The foundational premise is quite simple, yet it's often ignored in management, and that is, adults possess vastly different levels of competence, commitment, and experience.
Right. You cannot treat a brand new first-year employee the same way you treat a 20-year veteran.
The supervisor must adapt. Glickman outlines 4 distinct supervisory approaches, kind of on a spectrum.
Okay, walk me through the spectrum.
On one end, for a brand new or struggling teacher, you use directive control. The supervisor makes the decisions, sets the timeline, and closely directs the instruction. Moving down the spectrum, you hit directive informational.
Which is what?
The supervisor provides heavy guidance and suggestions, but the grip is slightly looser. The teacher has a bit more say.
I have to pause you there on that first phase. Directive control. If a boss is making all the decisions and closely directing my daily work, isn't that just micromanagement? It sounds like we are reverting right back to the hovering inspector.
It definitely looks similar from the outside, but the distinction lies in intent and duration. In the developmental model, directive control is temporary scaffolding. It is not a permanent leash.
Scaffolding, meaning it comes down eventually.
Exactly. Think of it like teaching a teenager how to drive a car on a busy highway.
Oh, terrifying.
Right. On day 1, you need absolute directive control. You say, put your foot on the brake right now, check your blind spot. That is not micromanaging. That is preventing a catastrophic crash because the novice lacks the competence to do it safely.
Ah, I see. The goal is to get them confident enough so you can eventually stop grabbing the steering wheel.
Yes. And if we connect this to the bigger picture, this is the hardest skill for any manager in any industry to master. As the teacher gains competence, the supervisor must move to the third phase, which is the collaborative approach.
So giant problem solving.
Exactly. And ultimately, the goal is the fourth phase, the non-directive approach. Here, the teacher identifies their own solutions, and the supervisor merely facilitates their thinking.
It's a sliding scale.
The ultimate failure of leadership is inaccurately assessing someone's developmental level. If you use directive control on a master teacher, they will resent you and quit.
For sure.
But if you use non-directive facilitation on a brand new hire, they'll just drown in confusion.
That transition from directing to collaborating makes so much sense. But it begs a question. Once an employee actually reaches that high level of competence, like once they know how to drive the car perfectly, what happens when we hand the keys over entirely?
Then you move into a model championed by Alan Glathorn, known as differentiated supervision. Glathorn argued that the traditional one-size-fits-all approach to professional development actively harms morale.
Because you're making everyone sit through the same basic seminar.
Right. His model is built entirely around flexibility, teacher choice, and professional autonomy. It basically offers a menu of distinct pathways based on what the teacher actually needs.
So rather than forcing everyone into the same room, the school offers different tracks.
Yes. For those who still need heavy support, there is intensive development, which features heavy mentoring and frequent observations.
Okay.
But for those ready to take ownership, there is self-directed development. A teacher might decide to pursue graduate studies, take an online certification, or engage in rigorous professional reading on their own time.
I like that, giving them actual agency.
And for those veteran teachers who are highly competent and functioning well, there is simply administrative monitoring.
Administrative monitoring. It sounds like the supervisor is just making sure the lights are on.
Essentially, yes. The school head simply ensures basic compliance with attendance, policies, and instructional standards. They get out of the teacher's way and let them work.
I love that menu of options. But there is one option on Glathorn's menu that seems to really dominate the modern educational landscape, especially in the DepEd system, and that is cooperative professional development.
Yes, which leads us directly into the broader framework of collaborative supervision. This is the idea that the most powerful resource in any school is not the principal. It's the collective expertise of the teachers themselves.
Here's where it gets really interesting. When you look at how DepEd implements this, they rely heavily on formal peer-to-peer structures. Like they use learning action cells, or LACs.
Right, LAC sessions.
These are school-based sessions where groups of teachers literally sit down to hash out classroom issues, share best practices, and develop new strategies together.
They also utilize professional learning communities, or PLCs. That's where teachers collectively analyze student assessment data to solve instructional roadblocks. You also see peer coaching, where teachers observe each other's classes, not to evaluate, but to provide constructive feedback. It is a system built entirely on shared leadership.
Okay, I have to be the skeptic here for a moment.
Please do.
This sounds utopian. Teachers, mentoring teachers, analyzing data in groups, observing each other. But looking at the very real challenges highlighted in the research, aren't these professionals going to be completely overwhelmed?
It's a huge concern.
A teacher already has to plan lessons, grade papers, and manage 30 or 40 kids in a room. If we add endless collaborative meetings and peer coaching to their plate, how do they balance this heavy workload without completely burning out?
You've hit on the central, really agonizing tension of the collaborative model, and the research is highly transparent about this. The benefits are undeniable. Shared leadership leads to vastly improved instructional practices and higher student achievement, but the logistical reality is brutal. There is severe time constraint, there is workload fatigue, and frankly, there is the human element of differing commitment levels.
Meaning the classic group project problem.
Exactly.
Some people are going to do all the heavy lifting in a learning action cell, and some people are just going to sit there and nod.
It is unavoidable in any organization, which is why collaborative supervision lives or dies based on the school leadership. A principal cannot just decree, "We're doing PLCs now," and then walk back to their office.
They have to actively manage it.
They have to actively engineer the master schedule to create common free time. They have to foster a culture of vulnerability where a teacher feels safe admitting to their peers that a lesson failed. They have to ensure the workload is distributed equitably. It is an incredibly heavy lift for administrators.
So if the system is stretched too thin, or if the schedule simply doesn't allow for an hour of peer collaboration on a given week, what does the teacher do? Because they need a fallback mechanism that doesn't just rely on the principal or their peers?
They have to look inward. The ultimate safety net for professional growth is the reflective supervision model.
Okay.
This approach is built on the theoretical foundations of Donald Schoen's reflective practice theory and David Kolb's experiential learning theory. It shifts the locus of control entirely to the individual. It uses rigorous self-assessment to foster lifelong learning.
The cycle for this seems very intuitive. You plan a lesson, you teach it, you reflect on how it went using student results or your own observation notes, and then you use those insights to improve your next lesson.
And DepEd formalizes this, so it isn't just a teacher staring at the ceiling after a long day.
Right, they have actual tools for this.
Yes. They use specific instruments. Teachers maintain RPMS reflection journals. They analyze their own metrics using the Classroom Observation Tool, or COT. They build individual development plans and maintain comprehensive teacher portfolios. All of this is constantly evaluating their own daily performance against the national standards of the PPST.
This reminds me of an elite athlete studying their own game tape.
Oh, that's a good comparison.
Like a truly great basketball player doesn't wait for the head coach to pull them aside on Tuesday to tell them their shooting stance was too wide on Monday. They go home, they pull up the video of their own performance, they spot the mechanical error themselves, and they make the adjustment before the coach even brings it up.
They supervise themselves.
Exactly.
That is the perfect encapsulation of reflective supervision. It builds autonomy and critical thinking. But the research cautions that this, too, has pitfalls.
Oh, I'm sure.
It requires heavy documentation, which adds to that time crunch we talked about. But more importantly, it requires a staggering amount of brutal honesty.
Yeah, that's tough.
It is very easy to watch your own game tape and invent excuses for why a lesson failed. Blaming the students, blaming the curriculum. True reflective practice often still requires a coach to occasionally help you see your own blind spots.
Okay, let's take a breath and look at this toolkit we've assembled.
It's a big one.
We have clinical supervision for objective, structured observation, developmental supervision to tailor leadership to employee competence, differentiated supervision to provide autonomy and choice, collaborative supervision to harness the power of the team, and reflective supervision to build self-awareness.
Right.
It's this comprehensive psychological toolkit for improving how a human being operates in a single room.
It is. But toward the end of Sabio's research, the scope of what these teachers are actually trying to achieve shifts dramatically. We have to zoom out from the micro level of a single classroom to the macro level of global impact.
This blew my mind. The research details how educational supervision is directly tied to the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals, or SDGs. For context, the UN adopted these 17 goals in 2015 as a universal call to action to end poverty, protect the planet, and ensure peace by 2030. And education is explicitly recognized as the engine required to achieve every single one of them.
Meaning a supervisor isn't just making sure a teacher understands algebra. They are monitoring how that teacher's instruction aligns with global survival.
And the integration into everyday Philippine classrooms is incredibly specific. For example, supervisors monitor how teachers handle SDG 4, quality education, by ensuring inclusive instruction for all learning styles.
Right.
Or SDG 5, gender equality. A supervisor evaluates if a teacher is using gender-responsive teaching, like making sure they aren't reinforcing biases during a math problem or an ESP lesson.
And for those unfamiliar, ESP stands for Educación sa Pagpakatao, which is the values education curriculum in the Philippines. It's a really critical space for these global concepts.
Makes sense.
Furthermore, supervisors monitor SDG 10, reduced inequalities, ensuring marginalized learners or those with disabilities are actively supported.
It even extends to the hard sciences. SDG 13 is climate action. Supervisors track how environmental awareness is integrated into science classes, or Erling Palapunan, which is social studies. This includes tangible initiatives like tree planting, waste segregation, and disaster risk reduction activities.
It's incredibly thorough.
And SDG 16, peace and justice, translates directly into strengthening child protection policies and positive discipline within the school walls.
This raises an important question. How does a human being actually balance this?
I was just thinking that.
Consider the psychological weight on a school supervisor. On a random Wednesday morning, they have to track whether a teacher's 45-minute lesson plan aligns with national DepEd standards, while simultaneously assessing if that exact same lesson is actively dismantling gender bias and contributing to global climate action.
It sounds utterly impossible. It sounds like a recipe for a massive panic attack.
It would be impossible if they were just using the old clipboard inspector method. But synthesizing all of these massive demands, That is the true beauty of these supervision models.
Because they overlap.
Exactly. A leader doesn't tackle the UN goals in isolation. If a principal is using collaborative LAC sessions to help teachers brainstorm inclusive education strategies, or if they are utilizing reflective journals to help a veteran teacher uncover their own unconscious biases,
Oh, wow. Yeah.
if they are using developmental scaffolding to help a novice teacher safely run a disaster preparedness drill, they are seamlessly connecting the micro to the macro. A single, well-supervised lesson on a Wednesday morning becomes a literal building block for a sustainable world.
So what does this all mean when we step back and look at this immense ecosystem, the national standards, the 5 different supervision models, the integration of 2030 global goals? What is the ultimate takeaway for someone navigating leadership today?
I think the most powerful synthesis is found in a quote from Carl D. Glickman himself, which anchors this whole body of research. He states, "The ultimate aim of supervision is to help teachers become more thoughtful, more reflective, and more effective in promoting student learning."
That's the core of it.
Yeah. Every single framework, every data analysis cycle, every collaborative action cell, they are merely vehicles designed to arrive at that one destination, which is a more thoughtful human being.
And for you listening, whether you are managing a division at a tech company, mentoring a junior colleague in your trade, or just trying to figure out how to accelerate your own professional growth, these models are your blueprint.
Absolutely.
When you need absolute clarity and objective data, use clinical structure. When an employee is learning the ropes and needs scaffolding, use developmental flexibility. When your team proves their high competence, grant them differentiated autonomy.
Harness the collective brain power through collaborative teamwork.
And demand rigorous reflective self-assessment. This research isn't just a manual for school principals. It is a masterclass in how to systematically unlock human potential without breaking the human spirit.
A profound way to look at it. Leadership is ultimately about creating the conditions where growth is inevitable.
But I want to leave you with one final thought to mull over, building on everything we've just explored. We have spent this entire deep dive examining how teachers are constantly guided, evaluated, and forced to adapt. They're balancing the intense scrutiny of national performance metrics with the existential weight of global sustainability goals, moving step by step from novices to masters under a careful, supportive eye.
Right.
But if an entire massive organization relies on this constant, watchful coaching presence at the classroom level, who is supervising the supervisors?
Oh, that's a great point.
How does a sprawling educational system, or the executive board of any major corporation for that matter, ensure that the people at the very top don't become completely blind to their own need for reflective practice? Think about that the next time you find yourself holding the manager's clipboard or the head chef's spoon.